which they have vestiges of visceral arches, they have gill pounces, gill clefts, and these facts suggest that these animals are descended from organisms that once lived in water. So that's part of the evidence that say, okay, man and apes, they are related because of the similarities that you find in the early developmental stages of these organisms. Then another evidence is the comparative anatomy, morphology, and the vestigial structures. In the general plan of the vertebrate skeleton, the muscular system and the digestive and nervous system, they seem to have a common ancestry, especially when the vestigial organs like the appendix, the coccus, and the hair muscles in man persist when the individual has no use for them. The persistence of non-functional scale leaf in parasites, such as we have in the doda plant, will suggest an ancestor for doda, that which was holophytic and not parasitic. That is, when we talk about parasitic plants, doda is one example that quickly comes to mind. But this is now telling us that it has a persistent non-functional scale leaf that is in doda. That suggests that the ancestor of doda that is holophytic, that is actually not parasitic in nature, but I think it's over a period of time in doda adapting to its environment that it became parasitic. Then other anatomical features which are of evolutionary significance include the birds developing wings for flying, the forelimbs in whale becoming flipper for steering and maintaining equilibrium during swimming. Then the fingers of monkey are elongated to form a grasping hand. So when monkey is moving from one tree to the other, it can easily switch from one branch to the other because of that adaptation. Then you have the limbs of horses. They are adapted for support when it's walking and it is running. Another evidence of organic evolution is the geographical distribution of plants and animals, both the ones that we have presently and their fossils. I mentioned fossils about a few minutes ago. Separation and isolation of related groups by some kind of physical barriers, such as mountains, deserts, oceans, or rivers, may prevent them from interbreeding. Then long period of geographical isolation brings about great differences between the related groups under different conditions in different environments. For instance, you have the same mango. Let's use mango for example. Mango, they are living here together. You now took one away. You take one away to an entirely different environment to go and nurture it. After a while, when you bring the seed of those mangoes together, they will look different because of different things that they are subjected to over a long period of time. So geographical and distribution of plants and animals also affects or gives us the evidence of an organic evolution. An example is members of two related groups fail to bear fertile offspring when they are mated because their genes have genes population, thereby they produce new species. A definition of species are a group of related species or group of related individuals that they can interbreed. When they are crossed or when they mate, they can produce a fertile offspring. That is a species. That's the definition of a species. For instance, when a man and a goat mate, definitely there will be no fertile offspring. Is it a goat that they produce or a human being? I'm not sure. But that mating will not result in either of the two of them because they are not of the same species. So by the time you take a particular group, they are together. Okay, let's say they are both goats or they are both the same plant, but you subject them to different environmental conditions over a long period of time. When they come together, they will not be able to produce a fertile offspring. So they have become new or entirely different species. Then another evidence of organic evolution is the role of mutation. Mutation is the sudden spontaneous appearance of distinct character in large population of organisms that is due to minor change in the DNA, the DNA makeup of their gene or chromosome. So when there is a sudden, a slight change in the makeup, that's the genetic makeup now, the DNA. Once there is a slight change, then we have what we call mutation. When a gene is altered in any way, the offspring acquire a new characteristics that is not possessed by either of his parents. Mutation can only be passed on to future generations when it occurs in the gene or in the gametes that leads to the production and the perpetuation of the new species. So once the mutation that occurs, the slight change in the gene, is not part of the gametes that is leading to the production of the new gametes, then it cannot be passed to the future generation. Then helpful characteristics acquired by mutation are likely to be passed on to their future generation. Now, another evidence of organic evolution is domesticated animals. Direct evidence of evolution is obtained when animal or plant breeders raise new varieties by crossbreeding. Now, I told you earlier about crossbreeding, when they select a breeding stock from animals that produce many strains of domestic animal. So when they mate the offspring of cow that were greatest milk producer, and they develop high-yield dairy cattle, the process is also occurring in nature. That process of natural mating or natural selection occurs in nature, but the way it occurs in nature is that the animals that survive to reproduce are selected, that is, they survive, unlike what the breeder would do. But those ones that are not viable or that cannot survive, they die out. So that's just the same thing that the breeder does. Then those offspring with characteristics totally unsuited to the environment, they leave no offspring at all, so they become extinct and they disappear from the population. Another evidence is serological tests. In finding possible evolutionary affinities, the blood proteins of different animals can be compared. So the closer two species are physiologically, the more alike their blood proteins are liable to be. So when you check the blood proteins of animals, the ones that are closely related, their blood proteins are also very, very similar. Then the last evidence of organic evolution is the role of isolation. If members of a species are separated into two or more populations by natural barriers such as mountains, ocean, river, for a long period of time, their genes may change to the extent that they can no longer interbreed again to produce viable offspring. I have explained that earlier, that when there are two or the same species, they are separated, they are of the same origin, but because of whatever condition, they are separated for a long period of time. They've lived in different worlds for a long period of time. By the time you bring them together, they may not be able to produce viable species, viable seed, or viable offspring. That is, their offspring may not be fertile again, and that means they are not the same species. They have now been classified as another species entirely. I will now be talking about convergent and divergent evolution. Convergent evolution. This is the phenomenon of developing structures in organisms that are not closely related as a result of living in similar ecological conditions or niches. Just as you have in your physics when you talk about convergent or divergent life. Convergent evolution is this: they don't have the same origin. They are not closely related. But because they now live in the same environment, the same ecological condition and niche, they are becoming similar. Their origin is different, but they are converging because of the way they related over time, even though their origin is different. This is similarity by analogy. That is, they serve the same purpose, but they have different evolutionary origins and thus a different embryological origin and structure. They don't have the same origin, but now, after living together in the same ecological condition and niche, they are having the same purpose. They are looking alike, so they are converging. just as you have in your light. Then the wings of birds and butterflies are independently adapted to life in air. They both use wings for flight, but they are constructed quite differently and they operate on different principles. So because they are adapted to flight, they both have feathers. Butterflies and birds, they don't have the same origin. So that is convergent evolution. Similarly, we have the legs of insects and mammals. Though performing the same tasks, have quite different structural organization. So that is also convergent evolution. Now to divergent evolution. Divergent evolution is a phenomenon of developing structures that, though in different species, are believed to have the same origin in a common ancestor. So we say they have, now these ones are just the opposite of convergent evolution. They have the same origin, but they are having different expressions. Just as you have divergent light, when there is a light of this source, then it's now spreading. So they have the same origin, but over time they are now developing structures that are different from each other. This is similarly by homology. Convergence is analogy. This one is homology. Different lines of evolution led to modification of the basic pattern to serve different functions, thereby enabling the descendants to fill a wide variety of ecological niches and clearly result in adaptive radiation. For instance, you have hind limb and forelimb in all land vertebrates. So they are said to be homologous because they are constructed on the same pentadactyl limb. That's the 5-digit pattern. Monkeys to have that. You have gorillas and so many other mammals that are constructed on that same pentadactyl limb. That's the 5 digits now, but they no longer serve the same purpose. In man, for instance, man is erect, so he's standing upright. He's not walking on his forelimb, unlike we have in other animals. We have in monkey, being is not erect, so he walks on his forelimb. So even though they have the same pentadactyl limb, but now they no longer serve the same purpose. So that's an example of divergent evolution.